Okay, so all of these 91 indictment charges against Donald Trump are complete and total nonsense. And I thought maybe what we should do is run through each of these trials that are occurring or charges that he's being attacked with in the different cases and expose how each one is complete and total fraud. Why don't we start with the classified records case, okay? They're not the same. Joe Biden was a senator and a vice president when he took classified records. As a senator and a vice president, he has no authority whatsoever to remove them. So he criminally removed the records from the classified settings that they were in. He possessed them for years and years and said nothing. He didn't have them stored safely. He didn't have them stored in a single location. They were all over the East Coast in various offices and in his garage, unlocked and open to the world. This is absolutely reckless and criminal behavior with classified documents. Donald Trump, on the other hand, was not a politician until he became president. And as president, he has the legal right to take classified documents after his administration to use as records in his presidential library. All the presidents do it. Clinton did it, Obama did it, Bush did it, Reagan did it. It goes back forever. The president has the right to take classified records. And the Department of Justice, the weaponized department under Merrick Garland, the little puke, the Department of Justice decided they were going to try and criminalize the dispute. So they created a civil dispute over the records he took with the Records Archives Office. And they said he should give some of the records back. So the Trump team went through all the boxes they had, and they gave a whole bunch of the records back. This is like in December. And having turned over all the records that they thought that they didn't really have to have or didn't want to consider for inclusion in the presidential library, the Department of Justice knew that they wouldn't turn over any more records. So they wrote a subpoena that said, hey, what you gave us isn't enough, give us everything else that you have. And they knew that that subpoena would be refused because the Trump people had already turned over what they were willing to turn over. So the Department of Justice engineered a subpoena that they knew would be refused because it was overly broad and overly excessive in its demands. The Trump people refused. Now, what you do when a civil dispute subpoena is ignored by the other party is you go into the civil court seeking an order from the judge to enforce the subpoena against the other party. And if they ignore the judge's order, the matter can escalate. But what you don't do is issue an indictment and make the civil records dispute into a criminal crime, allegedly, without any crime being committed. It's a civil dispute. Without any criminal investigation. They went right from he won't honor the subpoena to let's prosecute him without even bothering to go through the legal due process of seeking an order of the court from a civil judge to enforce the subpoena before criminalizing for failure to reply to the subpoena. So the whole thing was engineered by the Department of Justice. They knew the subpoena for the rest of the records would be refused. And then they immediately went to criminal charges of a president who had the right to have the records. And when they raided Mar-a-Lago, they didn't raid any of Biden's properties, the man who illegally took records. They raided the ex-president, Donald Trump, who had all the records safely stored in a locked spot under security at Mar-a-Lago in one place, waiting to be connected with whatever presidential library plans get made, which take a while to do. When the Justice Department raided Mar-a-Lago, they staged the photos. Trump didn't have the documents laid out on the floor. That was staged. And they're releasing evidence to prejudice the juries. The whole thing is criminal nonsense. They refused to prosecute Joe Biden, the person who committed the classified record crimes, and they're going after Donald Trump, the person that had properly taken care of them and had a legal right to possess the documents. If he didn't, that's a matter for civil court to settle, not criminal as an ex-president. Everything about that case is insane. And here's the really crazy part. Classified record crimes go to incompetence, carelessness, recklessness, and or accidental exposure. It's not necessary to show intent or willfulness or malicious intent. It's not necessary. If you accidentally or mistakenly or inadvertently leave a classified document in a place or location where it may be subject to viewing by parties that are not authorized to view it, that's a crime. And there are men at the Pentagon who served in the military who have spent a year in jail for just such an activity. To claim that Joe Biden can't be charged because he's too old and senile for a jury to determine intent is nonsense. The jury doesn't need intent to convict a classified records crime. It doesn't need intent. It goes to carelessness, recklessness, incompetence in handling. And Joe Biden demonstrated every single one of those tenets to a T. To a T. The man should be prosecuted, not Donald Trump. It's the weaponization of the Department of Justice and the double standard that doesn't prosecute Democrat criminals when it's obvious they're criminals. And it attacks Republicans or Trump or MAGA supporters on any excuse they can make up, like being a Catholic or being a parent concerned about the curriculum in your school, or being just a MAGA supporter who wasn't even at January 6th but still got 20 years. 20 years for not being there, for planning a protest. What happened to all the Black Lives Matter protest planners that looted, arsoned, assaulted, and actually set up chop zones, their own government, and attacked federal courthouses, locked the police out, and patrolled the chop zone with their own AR-15s? All of a sudden, the Democrats like guns when it's their chop zone, in their insurrection. January 6th was a mostly peaceful protest, not an armed insurrection. More nonsense. Okay, let's talk about Letitia James and Arthur Engeron, the case in New York, where they used the consumer fraud law to accuse Donald Trump of committing fraud against the banks who testified no fraud was committed. So this is a consumer fraud case where there are no consumers and there is no fraud. It's a completely novel and first-time use of the statute to go after someone in the manner it's being used. And the whole thing is made up. The banks testified. There are no damages. There was no fraud. In these kinds of negotiations, each party puts forth their proposal based on the basket of assets they're holding and a proposed valuation to be assigned to that basket. No party accepts the other side's terms. They counter. And there's a negotiation, a discussion, and they meet in the middle. Everybody knows this. It's just like Kevin O'Leary says, every single real estate transaction on the planet is carried out this way. Oh, but for the Democrats, if there's a Republican named Trump involved, it's a crime. No, it's not. There's no consumer, there's no fraud, and there are no damages. Deutsche Bank testified they want to do business with the man again and apologize to him for being forced to testify in court against him. The whole thing is made up. And when there's no damages at all, Engeron comes up with $350 million. Bernie Madoff defrauded thousands of people of tens of billions of dollars. His bail was $10 million. $10 million. $10 billion in consumer fraud. His bail was $10 million. Donald Trump had no consumer fraud, no fraud at all, no consumers were cheated, and his bail is $450 million? Gee, I wonder how they picked that figure. I'll tell you how they picked the figure. Donald Trump had announced that he has $500 million in cash that he wants to use in his campaign to get reelected. And Arthur Engeron, the political animal, he's not a judge, he's not an attorney, he's a political piece of crap. This political piece of crap is trying to take all of Donald Trump's cash away. Not because it's commensurate with the crime or the amount of damages that were done, because there were none. Not because it's meted out as punishment, because there was no crime. But to politicize and interfere with the election by interfering with Donald Trump's ability to spend money on it. So that case is a complete and total fraud made up by two Democrats, the judge and the attorney general, in a Democratic district with a Democratic jury who would convict, as Alan Dershowitz says, who would convict a ham sandwich if it came out of a Trump kitchen. So that case in New York is a complete and total fraud. Letitia James is a political animal who actually ran for office, attorney, promising to go after Donald Trump. But there was no crime, there was no investigation. This is political persecution and election interference. It's got nothing to do with crime in New York. They're just exposing the fact that New York is now a politicized city, and if you're a Republican, you can't do business there. Well, good luck, New York, sending that message. Good luck. Okay, let's take a look at the January 6th case that Jack Smith is prosecuting. He's also prosecuting that classified documents crime that I talked about initially. That's down in Miami. The January 6th case is in Washington, D.C., and this is something Jack Smith just decided to dream up and add on his own. It wasn't part of the special counsel assignment to investigate. That was just the classified records document crime. But the Joe Biden administration doesn't think that's enough. They want him prosecuted for January 6th and telling in his speech the American people to walk peacefully and patriotically up to the Capitol to make your voices be heard. Supposedly that's basis for an insurrection. That's what they're prosecuting him for in Washington, D.C. on the January 6th. They're prosecuting him allegedly for inciting the insurrection, but nobody's ever been charged with insurrection. Trump has not been charged with insurrection, and telling people to march peacefully and patriotically doesn't constitute inciting anything. Again, it's a fraud to slander and libel Donald Trump in the eyes of the voting public to try and interfere in the election, hoping that if they can slander him enough with enough made-up fictional criminal charges, people won't want to vote for him, and particularly so if they can get one conviction before the election, knowing the conviction is going to be vacated, set aside, and overturned in the appeals court because there's no crime. There's no evidence of any crime. Making a phone call isn't a crime, and he should never have been impeached over the Ukrainian phone call when he was absolutely right about the circumstances. Biden had been taking money from the Ukrainians to protect the company Hunter was working for. It was as crooked as it gets. As crooked as it gets. This is a politician, an American politician, selling access and peddling influence as a senator and a vice president. It's as criminal as it gets. But oh no, Merrick Garland doesn't see any crime there. He only sees it over on the Trump side by telling people to march patriotic and peacefully. Oh, insurrection, insurrection. Nonsense. Criminal persecution. Political persecution with criminal charges that are trumped up How the heck did they come up with that name? I'll bet Trumped Up is some time traveler who came from, when did it start? The 18th century to this era, watched all this stuff going on and said, oh my God, the future sucks. I'm going back to where I came from. He went back to the 1800s and made up the Trumped Up story. The charges are all trumped up, and here we are right back again with the charges being trumped up. That means fake, totally fake, fictional nonsense, political attacks launched against political opposition and philosophical opposition, not any criminal. You want to go after criminals? What about the cartels? Why don't we go after the cartels, the sex traffickers, the drug traffickers? Why don't you go after the fentanyl peddlers? You're letting them walk out of court. No bail. Think they came back for the next hearing? No, I'll tell you what they did. They went back to Mexico and making another fentanyl drug ring run. Bring more poison into the country to kill more Americans. And Joe Biden sits there and ignores it. What a piece of crap. Absolute piece of crap this idiot is. He represents foreigners over America. And he attacks Americans who think we should make America great again. This man is the enemy of the American people. He's the enemy of the Constitution. He's the enemy of freedom, liberty, limited government, personal responsibility. He's the enemy of intelligence. He's the enemy of intelligence. And his entire party has been co-opted. And I guess that takes us to the last case, which is down there in Georgia with Fannie Willis, who is, again, alleging that a phone call to Georgia politicians to try and see if there wasn't some way extra or more votes that hadn't yet been counted or had been wrongfully counted could be found in Georgia to affect the counts, to change the outcome possibly, but only if the votes could be found. He didn't ask anyone to cheat. He asked them to look and see, do whatever they could to make sure that the counts were correct. Oh, but that's a crime, according to Fannie Willis. That's insurrection. So what does she do? She hires her lover, pays him $1 million, takes a kickback on the funds, and he goes to Washington, D.C. to meet with the White House attorneys for over 8 hours to coordinate the attack. This is the White House directing all of these. Jack Smith is federal. He's prosecuting in Miami and in D.C. at Biden administration's bidding. Fannie Willis in Georgia is doing the bidding of the administration. She actually sent Wade to meet with them twice. And there's no doubt but that Letitia James and Arthur Engeron are motivated from political persecution, not law. They're both hacks. Liberal political animal hacks. They're not attorneys, they're not judges, they're political hacks who shouldn't be in office because they don't understand impartial prosecution. And they can't keep their own heads and asses out of the case. So we know the Fannie Willis case is a joke. She's going to be barred from prosecuting it on appeal because she lied to the judge just like Nathan Wade did. And the solution is not to let one liar proceed with prosecuting the case while preventing the other liar from doing it. The solution is to kick both liars out of the courtroom. And that probably means you have to move the case to another attorney's office, which means it's probably going to get dismissed because none of the other attorneys feel like they want to prosecute this because there's no crime. It's a phone call. And it's clear this is as dirty as it gets, hiring your lover and then paying him 10 times as much money as you pay the prosecutors who actually have RICO experience. Nathan Wade didn't have any RICO experience, but he was hired to be the lead prosecutor in this alleged RICO trial. Oh, yeah, that's going to work out real good, isn't it? Real good, isn't it? Yeah, we see how it worked out. He's off the case. All the experience is gone. All the stuff he's done is tainted. And she's tainted too. And she should be kicked off the case, and I think she will when the appeals court reviews the record and sees what she said in court, because the phone records prove they both were lying about when the relationship started. It started well before the case. She hired a lover. She didn't hire an independent attorney. She hired a lover, overpaid him, and took the kickbacks while they enjoyed the life of luxury at resorts and concerts and other events and things that she wanted to go to but didn't have the money to do. So she just used state funds paid to her lover, Nathan Wade. And, oh yeah, right, she paid everything back in cash because black women have lots of cash. Everybody knows that. Didn't you know that? You didn't know black girls have lots of cash? I didn't. I don't think Fanny knew it either, which is why she had to rely on Nathan Wade. They have lots of cash. It's just nonsense. It's just nonsense. Lies, lies, lies. Every attorney involved in these cases is lying. And the judges are lying by allowing it to go forward. Not a single one of these cases are legitimate, as I've just laid out for you. Not a single one of them is legitimate. The Miami case was a setup that went from a civil investigation to a criminal raid without criminal cause, just to escalate the matter and to charge Donald Trump. The Georgia case is made up. It's over a phone call. The Washington, D.C. case is made up. It's over a January 6th speech on the Mall to urge people to patriotically and peacefully make your voices heard. And the New York case is made up. There's no consumers who lost a thing. There's no fraud. The statute's never been used this way before in the history of New York. Oh, and did we forget about the last case? The one where the judge has just put another unconstitutional gag order on Donald Trump, the Stormy Daniels hush money, where now they're prosecuting Donald Trump for paying a prostitute? But he didn't pay her to have sex. He paid her to go away. So Donald Trump is probably the first man in New York history to be charged with paying a prostitute not to have sex, but to go away. I'm sorry, isn't that kind of why prostitutes exist? Is because they go away and keep quiet? Because they won't get much business if they don't do both of those things. I mean, really. I'm not defending the behavior. I'm just pointing out that normally they charge the men for paying the girls for having sex, not for not having sex, but just to go away. So that case is completely fraud, completely made up, and the gag order is completely unconstitutional. So while the DA and the offices go on slandering Donald Trump in the public for the next 3 months, he can't say anything back about the case? What nonsense is this? If the judge can't stand the heat, he should get out of the kitchen.